Welcome everyone, today we have a new guide for Tower Fantasy. Now as you can see behind me, I'll be trying to share with you guys some of my tips and also tricks for BYGONE Fantasy and also BYGONE Phantasm. So what I want to share with you guys is some of the tips and also tricks to do tremendous damage to the enemy with your gadgets and also different methods. And I'll also go through a number of other tips for BYGONE Phantasm for this video, because there's a lot of things I recently discovered and this can help you along the way to get to higher levels and also to get more loot in the game. So coming over to this week of my BYGONE Phantasm. So what I want to show you guys is I'm currently ranked number 4 and I just discovered this week. So notice how the number 1 player is ranked 300, passing 300 levels, and me as ranked number 4 is 220. Notice that I'm actually in front of the players which passed 300 levels, and here I'm in front of the players passing 260 and also in front of the player with 239 levels. So why is that? So I did not actually notice this last week. So last week I thought this was actually a bug. You can see that last week I was on 221 levels and I had 0 points of the sequential BYGONE Phantasm, and this meant other players with only 190 levels was ahead of me in ranking, and I was really puzzled, right? So what I want to share with you guys firstly on this video is actually I just discovered this week. It's really silly of me. One of my viewers told me about this. He's like, hey Matt, you haven't been doing this other part of the BYGONE Phantasm. I was like, what? So what is happening is make sure you guys also do the sequential Phantasm as well to get a ton of points. So not only do you get a ton of rewards for clearing those, so what you want to do is you want to select each of those to collect those and also to get points on each of those particular challenges. And by getting those points on the challenges, those points will be added to your ranking. And this is the first tip I want to share with you guys. We'll talk about how to get more points on the second part of this video, but the first tip is come over to clear those points. And once you clear, notice here I have about 3,000 points. Those points will be added towards your ranking for BYGONE Phantasm. And this is one of the reasons I was on 220 levels passing the stages, but I'm still ahead of players over 300 levels because I have about 3,300 points over here. So the logic of the point system is that the points are added together. So what that means is I have 3,300 points from the sequential Phantasm plus the 2,200 points for clearing 220 levels. So this is one of the ways to get you ahead of the group, and for players who doesn't know this, you'll be way ahead even with lower levels. So remember on the previous video, there are players with only 190 levels, 112 levels ahead of me. So simply because you're clearing the sequential Phantasm and getting a ton of points this way each of the week. So make sure you guys do this and get ahead of the crowd. And this is basically a freebie, right? I realized a lot of players just like me last week, they're not aware of this and they're not clearing the multiple functions. So make sure you come over here and clear those to get additional rewards and also to place yourself on top of the rank. And by being on top of the rank, you'll be enjoying more dust and also more boosters. So this is really good to start off the video. And I really want to highlight this with you guys on the start of the video. Now coming over to our next tip for BYGONE Phantasm. So what I realized is one of the hardest boss monsters that you can fight is definitely the 4th spot. This is very chaotic, a lot of random freezing spells and a lot of moves that is hard to predict, and it's really hard to keep it in place. But what I realized is if you use 2 of those gadgets together in sequential, you can be very powerful. So the 2 gadgets I'm using is gonna be, I'll show you guys over here. So I also show you I actually upgraded those gadgets as well. So the 2 gadgets I'll be using is gonna be the Type V armor. I actually upgraded this item to 2 stars. And also I'm using Omen hand cannon. And you don't really need to upgrade this one, to be honest. So this on the first start just increases duration to 30 seconds, which will still be helpful. So I have those 2 gadgets ready. And let me show you guys what to do with the 4th spot. And this is actually a really good trick to do a tremendous damage to this particular type of boss monster, because this one is really hard. So before I start the gate, I actually start a portal of the hand cannon. And this actually gets to go up while I open the gate. So notice here I'll jump onto the gate before the boss is aggroed, and then I transform into the Type V armor. So especially with this boss, I'm not sure if this works with all the bosses, but I never really had troubles with other bosses, just with this one. Once you do this sequence in the correct order, what's going to happen is you can start to shoot down the boss and he will not move, or it will not move. And this will allow you to get, about 20 or 30% of the boss's HP down in about 30 seconds. So if you guys are short on damage or having trouble with bosses like this one, you can definitely use this trick. Now do keep in mind guys, if you don't get it right the first time, try a few other times. So it did take me about half hour to practice this and to get this perfectly. So notice I did about 20% of the boss's HP, and this is really good method to deal more damage. Now one thing you do want to notice is, when you enter the BYGONE Phantasm, you will have all the relics resetted. So this means if you don't get it right, you can exit and come back in again. And over here you can see me trying over, multiple times against this boss. Each time I don't get it right, I come back in again and I try this multiple times. You can do this against the boss multiple times to try to find a sweet spot and also to find a positioning that works for you. Sometimes if it doesn't work, just exit the particular level and come back in again. So notice this time the boss is actually aggroed. So you will want to do this before the boss is aggroed, so it stays in place. This will take you a few attempts, and once you get it right, you will do additional damage to boss types like this one. Now that we had a look at the two of the most important tips for the BYGONE Phantasm I discovered, the next part is about getting weapon bonus powers and also bonus stats. So one thing you want to notice is those weapon bonus do rotate on a daily basis. So if you do have trouble with a level, especially one of the harder levels, beyond the level 180 or going beyond that, what you want to do is you can wait for a time which one of your weapons gets boosted. And over here, this is one of my examples against 195 boss, and this time my primary DPS weapon was the Samir, the dual EM blade, dual EM stab. So notice that this item is buffed for this bigger level, and I waited until while my weapon was buffed against this boss. So there is a lot of ways to deal more damage to the levels if you find the method and also the tricks to it, with gadgets and also waiting for weapon buffs. So in case you guys don't defeat one of the bosses on one day, you can still come back in the other days of the week to try to defeat those bosses this way. And what I also do is I'll give you guys a quick rundown of some of the bosses I encountered and some of the tips and also tricks against them. Now, because the fourth spot is by far one of the strongest boss I've felt and really annoying, so let's start with the fourth spot. So against the fourth spot, what I try to do is always try to shatter his shield, and this will give you a tremendous time to do damage. And after shattering the shield, and after the first spot gets into a phase which will fire 3 of the ice cannons at you, if you get hit, you'll be frozen and lose valuable time. So one of the ways I use to dodge those cannons is to use a particular discharge spell. So with full energy, so let me move my head a little bit over here. So with full energy over here, so what I want to show you guys is, so against the bosses, when he is going to fire the 3 of the ice balls, when it's about to hit me, I usually use a discharge spell to dodge one of them, and then I start to run in circles against him. You really don't want to be hit by one of those force balls, and this is one of the biggest time loss against this boss, and I do think it's quite important. Now against this AoE attack, if you jump into the sky into the right timings, you'll be able to dodge this. And finally, if you're about to take damage or if you're about to be fallen down against the boss, you can use the discharge spell like this to do additional damage and to get up quickly. Now, if you combine the whole combination that I told you guys earlier with the machinery firings, you do skip one of the round of the 3 triple ice balls. So notice that the boss is not firing those ice bullets at me. So right away he goes into shield mode, and this allows you to do more damage. And notice that I got hit multiple times. So even losing valuable time like this, I can still defeat the boss using those tricks. Now the next boss we can have a look at is gonna be Sweetie. So this is actually one of the bosses that we fought in the world boss. So one thing I do want to highlight with you guys is I'm using a dual EM star. What I notice is if I rotate myself in 45-degree angle and rotate backwards, notice that the boss is kind of stuck and it's continuously moving towards me. I'm not saying you guys will have this weapon or need to try this method, but this has been working wonderfully for me. So what I'm trying to do is I try to reverse in a certain angle, and the boss is either electrified or the boss is delayed in such a way that I can deal more damage towards it. So just a small trick. I don't think you guys really have problem with this boss, and she's one of the easier bosses once you shatter her, and she's quite straightforward. Now coming over to the next boss, and this one will be Freak. As for Freak, as long as you don't really attack her when she's in the counter phase, and if you do damage over time, and if you do enough damage, she is actually quite straightforward. Now her attacks are quite rapid, so if you can dodge those, make sure you dodge those, and if you dodge them correctly, you can have a time freeze. What I tend to do is I tend to slow her down a little bit with my dodge attack, special dodge attack with Nemesis, and I have been finding this especially useful. So what I do is I do a dash and then I do an attack with Nemesis, which creates a time slow bubble. And against Freak, who is quite, rapid and also fast moving, this is actually quite useful. But I didn't really have too much, difficulty with her. As long as you can shatter her shield when she's charging, then you should be fine. And, with some perfect dodges, you'll have no problem with her. And the next boss is going to be Seraphim. Now, as for Seraphim, you just have to dodge the lasers. Some of the lasers you can work against it, other lasers you do have to jump on top of it. I don't think I really had trouble with her, so notice that some of the lasers you work between them, and some of the lasers you jump on top of her to do more damage. And one of the next boss we have is going to be Commander Hakuba. Now this boss is actually quite nice, simply because once you shatter the monster, you can then mount onto the boss. Now you don't have to mount right away, you can wait for the shadow and deal a little more damage. And then after, if you press F to mount onto the boss, you will do tremendous damage for a short duration. And this will also disable the boss. So this is actually quite an easy boss for me, as long as you don't get comboed by him and you keep your distance. So always take a little time, wait to shatter him, and save all your spells to shatter him to deal more damage after shattering. And finally, we have the Centaur. Now as for the Centaur, it is similar to the Commander. You do want to shatter this boss, but because the Centaur will be charging around the place a lot, you really want to time yourself into an instance where you can have a time freeze. If you don't get a time freeze, you can still dodge his spells with a discharge spell. And as for me, it is quite important I get every shatter I get against this boss, because it's very mobile, and if you get a time freeze, you can then be free to shatter it. And after shattering, you can mount on top of it. So always wait for perfect timing for the time freeze, and then shatter the monster, and then get on top of him. Notice I'm dealing additional damage before I mount onto the monster, because there's a bit of time before that. I know I'm just losing my words a little bit, too excited to share this with you guys. Now let's come into the next part, which will talk about the Seq Phantasm and how to get more points on that one. Now, because I only discovered the Seq Phantasm this week, I'm sure some of you already know about this. So notice that before discovering this, I only have 2,200 points for clearing over 220 levels. And now discovering this, I all of a sudden have over 5,000 points. So the focus is on how to do this and how to get more points. I won't say I'm an expert, but do keep in mind, each of the challenges have categories, so there will be 3 challenges in total. You could be earning points on each of those challenges individually. So as for the first challenge this week, you can be dealing additional damage to Vault and also to Physical, and those are the only damages you can deal to the enemy. So what we do is, we need a weapon at least dealing physical damage or Vault damage. And similarly for the next challenge, you will need a weapon that deals force damage. And finally, for the last challenge, you will need a weapon that deals flame attack or flame damage. Now initially, all of the challenges will start with 0 points, and also you start with 0 points. So as you clear one of the challenges, you'll be given some of the points. So let me show you guys an example over here for clearing the first challenge. And over here, I think I was a little short on time and I wasn't sure which of the attacks I was using, so I didn't get magic points on the first try. I got about 528 points on the first challenge. And what I want to show you guys is, after leaving the first challenge, you can then start the second challenge. It is preferable to start to clear them for the first go, and then try to min and max to get the highest points you can for this week. So let me show you guys over here. So notice over here for this particular challenge, I got 500 points. And now I started trying the next one and also the next one. Now because I actually don't have a good force weapon, so I actually couldn't clear much of the monster on the first challenge. This will happen to you as well, because unless you have multiple weapons and have the right elements, you might be running short on elemental damage. And what I did was I gave all my best chips to my force weapon, and even with that I only got about 600 points. I later got a little higher points, but it's quite challenging if you don't have the right elemental weapons for a certain challenge. And finally, we have the last challenge for the flame. So what you want to do is, you do want to select onto the challenge and then go into the challenge. And notice over here, I was about a little short into getting 3,000 points. So I've been fighting those challenges multiple times. Notice I started with 520 points, I'm on 580 points. And from 600 points, I got to 900 points. And finally, from 1,500 points, I do believe on my last attempt, I got much better points. So definitely try different weapon compositions and try to give the best chips for the right elemental weapons. So what I did was, I gave all my damage chips to my king this time, and I was trying to use the discharge spells for the king to do AoE damage. And I was trying to survive with Nemesis to heal, because some of the monsters would deal massive damage to you. and I couldn't even survive long enough. And notice this time I got about 1,880 points, and this is much higher than what I got before. So after trying all of those challenges, I was able to get over 3,000 points. And using this particular method, what you can do is, you can then come back to the BYGONE Phantasm to get a massive skip ahead to compare to other players who haven't done this. So if you guys haven't seen this, definitely try this out. Now, if you found this video helpful, make sure you subscribe and also turn the little bell on for the latest news. I'll be looking towards to make more builds, guides, tips, and news and event updates for us as we come further into the game. And as always, I wish you guys the best of luck with capturing and have the most fun in exploring this wonderful world.